Hello, we are Meltwater Pulse. I am Gabby. I make music as Murphy K. Jana.
I'm Jana. I go by Jana Lynn Rose. Stage name, I guess, if I ever go on stage. I am starting to record music, and I collaborate on these fine people's pieces as well.
Brett.
I'm Brett. I make music as Brett JB, and that's all I have to say.
Shane.
I'm Shane Olivo. I run, my voice cracks apparently, and I run a studio called Shane Olivo Audio, which records everyone in the group when they're not recording in their own home. I also had a band once called The New Loud. That was 11 years ago, 10 years ago, something.
A million years ago.
A million years ago.
All right, so today we are going to talk about one of the main things we do as a group for each other, and that is critiquing each other's work. And I don't know who wants to start talking about their feelings.
I'm going to start. I want to start because I have found it very useful, and I feel like I'm getting the hang of getting critiqued where basically I think I'm going to speak, this is a ridiculous thing to do, but I'm going to speak on behalf of most artists, and it's like especially like struggling artists who haven't had any like success, they kind of like need some kind of ego to keep them going, to keep them like no one's telling them they're like good or that they should be working on music. So at the very least, like you need some mechanism in your head to be like, no, this is good. I feel like that's the start of where the ego comes in. But what I see as a similarity is like they're super protective about their songs or their artwork in general. And maybe this even goes all the way up. So it's like I describe it for myself as having like a weird little king that sits in my head, and when I share my song to these guys, it's like the little king is just sitting there being like, I'll be accepting compliments and I'll be accepting, everyone telling me how amazing I am, and that's it. And so if it's anything other than that, I'll get super like butthurt and I'll get mopey.
You'll get all Henry VIII on their ass.
No, it's Atlantic.
No, I don't get Henry VIII. I get like, was there an emo king?
No, you're Atlantean God King.
Oh, yeah. I feel like Atlantean God King would be cooler than that. I'm like the maybe emo Atlantean God King. But whatever, I get like super upset. And it takes a long time to hear the criticism as like what it is. And then it takes another level of work to be able to implement that in your own songs and creative process, and that's what we've been working on, and it's fucking hard, and it's hard all the time even though we're used to it, and I still am a fan of it though. So that's what I have to say on it. You don't want to respond to that rant?
I think I feel similarly to Brett. I hate getting critiqued like on a certain level. It's like a very, I don't know, sometimes it makes me feel like a little kid almost. Like I know that it shouldn't hurt, but it does. It's like when I get my shots at the doctor. I'm like, I will accept this because I know it's good for me. But
Are you saying you're an anti-vaxxer, Gabby?
What about that was anti?
I'm kidding.
I'm not anti-vax. I'm like reluctant. I'm a reluctant vaxxer. I'm like,
wait, are we still using that in like as a metaphor for critiques?
Yeah. So I will accept the critique, but I don't like it. And I know it's good for me. And so I will go through the process. Or like working out, that like your body is gonna hurt and it's gonna be hard and you're gonna be out of breath and you're gonna get sweaty. But like if working out is something, or if like I don't know, staying in shape is something that's important to you, that means you're going to have to go through that, like to achieve your goals.
I found this Twitter comment that says, I'm personally offended that eating better and working out actually make me feel good.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
I like my analogy too that I thought of the other day when I was with Shane and Jana. I was like, getting critiqued feels like you guys are like rearranging my underwear while I'm like wearing it. Like, it's just like, I want to like swat you away. I want to like yell, but I just like, I've learned to just be still and just kind of face in the corner and just let you do it. And then like after a few days, like it feels better.
Or here's another one. We're just going to keep coming up with analogies if someone doesn't stop us. It's like when someone tells you that you have lettuce in your teeth.
My experience.
You're like, I kind of fucking hate you for telling me, but also thank you, but also fuck you.
Yes. Jenna, what was your experience like?
My experience started when I was very young. I took piano lessons starting when I was 7 or 8 years old, and I had teachers that made us do like recitals, and I was in solo ensemble for a long time in school. So I was critiqued constantly on my performance and in lessons every week, but not on my own music. So, and I really haven't brought my music out in any capacity really until recently. So being critiqued for me is it feels familiar, but in a way different way. Like it's me being critiqued by my, I guess, intellectual properties rather than performance properties. And I realized at a young age that I did not like performing. So I haven't really been a stage performer, but my music being critiqued it's difficult. But I also want it. Like, I don't want to be stuck in the same style that I realize I have a very strong style and I don't want to lose track of that, but I really, without the critiques, I'm never going to broaden that style. That style will never evolve. So I'm grateful for the critiques and I'm grateful for the collaborations in the group.
So it seems like we're all getting at the same point of like, thank you, but fuck you also when we get a critique, even from people, us who we know have our best interests. Like, it's crazy that we still have that response, but we all do, right?
I mean, I don't think it's that crazy. I think it's kind of a human thing to not enjoy people telling you things could be better.
It's crazy because it seems like it should be like an egomaniac response. And I don't think any of us are particularly egomaniacs. But
Speak for yourself.
I have an egomaniac response to this thing. It's like I shouldn't.
I get hyper defensive, but then I have noticed that my next like attempt at writing, I literally try everything that was presented from the previous critique.
I think something that's really interesting is that the critiques of songwriting are different from critiques of performance in that for the most part, performance critiques are technical and objective. There are certain things like, I'm thinking just like different vocal coaches have different opinions about, like whether or not you should voice things in a traditional way or more like your speaking voice, like those are like little things, but like for the vast majority of performance critiques, they're going to be on something technical that you could like rank on a scale of 1 to 10, whereas like a lot of things are subjective. And when we're critiquing things, there will be things where we end up being kind of split, where it'll be like me and Jana think one thing and Brett and Shane think something else. About or, and it splits in a lot of ways too. I feel like there are lots of times where there are critiques that are about I don't know how to describe it, like the theory of the song or the story of the song or something specific about lyrics, mostly lyrics, where I will have one viewpoint and everyone else in the group has a different viewpoint about it. Where I'm like, oh, I don't mind if like this verse goes first, where everyone else is like, no, I think that one should go last because like with the story, and I'm like, no, it's like a callback, and it's like technically none of us are correct. It's like all personal choice. So like maybe that's part of what makes it difficult, is that like if it was something that was objective, you could just like Google it and be like, no, that should be a B flat. But like,
Okay.
a lot of stuff is subjective.
I wanna jump in quick to highlight something you said though, because I thought it was good. It's like if it isn't objective, it's like what is the orientating device for our critiques? Like what are we, when we're critiquing something, what are we doing? Are we just like saying our gut feelings when we listen to the song? Are we trying to like pick out a story that the artist has given us, which is what you said, Gabby? You were like, you kind of state a goal and a story for the song, and then we critique if your lyrics are doing that story, right?
So I don't think you can have effective critique if there's just two people necessarily involved, and I don't think that you can have effective critique if they're, say, both part of the same group. The thing that makes this group special is that there's 3 or more, I mean 4 if you count me, independent songwriters all working on our own songs. So we all are skilled in the songwriting, in songwriting in general, but we all have come at songwriting from different backgrounds. So Jana's come at it from like a more traditional, classically trained background, and then I would say I'm purely kind of instinctual, and then I would say that Gabby and Brett are probably somewhere in between me and Jana. But I don't think if you just had 2 people, it would be as effective, because where it really shines is when someone presents something, and then if there's more than one person in the group saying, maybe you should change this to that, and it's a similar thing, it holds a heavier weight. Where, for instance, in my band from the Stone Ages of rock and roll, the New Loud, the other 2 people in the band, they didn't participate very much in the general songwriting process. So then when I had an idea, their opinion didn't hold as much weight, and maybe it was just me being an asshole, but I would just kind of like bulldoze any like kind of pushback and would have ways to explain why I was doing what I was doing. Whereas if the critique is from independent voices that are also songwriters themselves, that the other key component is that everyone's trying to work for everyone else's benefit. And I've been talking a long time.
Giving critiques, I think, is kind of a challenge too, because you have to, like Gabby has mentioned, there has to be a reason behind your critique. So the more experience that we have giving critiques and the more experience we have listening to other critiques, I think the more constructive those critiques will be, which is why we really try constantly to listen to different music, keep updated on Pitchfork, which was something that Shane has been kind of pretty adamant about since the beginning of Meltwater Pulse, is just kind of keeping up with the top 50 of what's popular on Spotify, what's popular on Pitchfork, and kind of dissecting successful music and successful recent bands or solo artists, because it's important to reflect on that stuff if we're going to give constructive criticism to each other.
And so the reason why I picked Pitchfork, because a lot of people hate on Pitchfork, but Pitchfork actually looks at artists like music artists as if they're true artists. And by that, I mean, if you look at, and maybe other publications have changed their style based around Pitchfork, how they do it. But when you're talking about like fine arts things, when you look at an artist's work, it's you're looking at their whole life up until that point, and it goes from work to work to work to work. And Pitchfork does a similar thing. So when there's like an album review, they'll talk about the artist's life, how they've progressed from the last album to that album, or if it's their first record, they'll talk about the background of the artist, and then they'll have something to say, meaningful to say about, how the album or songs, groups of songs are an expression of them as a person, versus just having someone being like, this album is good because the guitars sound cool, just like the album. Pitchfork doesn't approach it as if the albums or songs exist in a vacuum. And I think that that's important for all people, because your music doesn't exist in a vacuum. And it should be a reflection. I think all art ultimately is a reflection of the artist perceiving their life. And it's the kind of output of that. But what you don't see a lot is, especially with along local music, is you don't see people developing an intention for that process, like specifically taking that into account and really dissecting what that means for them.
Right. So it's like, you can go ahead, Gabby.
I mean, to go back to Brett's original kind of prompt, I think that the sort of yardstick that I use when I'm giving critiques, I think the most important thing, number one, would be what does the person you're critiquing find important about their own work? So I'm not going to critique Brett's work the same way that I would critique Jana's, because Brett and Jana have different goals for what they want their music to sound like, what their how their identity is tied into their music, what instrumentation, that they actually want. So part of it is listening to what that person thinks about their own music, and making sure that their music is aligning with what they want. And I think that's where, it sort of turns into, I think that that's the ideal role of a producer in music, is taking the artist's goal for whatever project and being able to articulate that in the work itself and the different components of it. So that's number one, is just comparing what the artist actually wants for themselves versus what they're doing. And then the other thing would be what other artists are doing with similar projects. So the Pitchfork thing is a good example of that. Or I know we all sort of dig into our own influences when we're talking about stuff. So, Jana will come with a song and I'll be like, oh, this sounds like this one artist that I like. And it's not necessarily just a random popular artist. And I think for me, as the person who is critiquing, you learn to kind of listen for that. And I think that's important, to be able to find artists that you enjoy, that also some aspect of their music lines up with the person you're critiquing. And then you can sort of draw from that outside artist. And then I think that's also why it's important that all of us listen to a lot of music. And I think that's maybe one of my strong points, and I know it's definitely one of Shane's strong points, is that like we both listen to a lot of music and a lot of different kinds of music. And that gives you just like a larger library to pull from when you're comparing stuff.
But I think everything you said was really good. But I also want to say that you and all of us, I think, have gotten, along with getting better at taking critiques, we're all working on getting better at giving critiques, which is all the stuff you just mentioned. And it's like maybe we'll throw this to Jana. It's like, what when you first started, like, well, actually, I think we have like a kind of like a tutorial in Gabby's apartment that one time about like how to.
Yes,
you get
a video of that. But I think that being in Meltwater Pulse is a really good vehicle for giving and taking critiques, because we know each other's style, and that what Gabby said, and that's kind of an important element for being more receptive to those critiques. Like, if anyone off the street or a musician that didn't know me tried to critique my stuff, I would be like, okay, well, are you comparing that to your interests or what you know I'm all about? So I know what Gabby's all about. I know what Brett's music is all about. And based on that, I can relate to things that I've heard and kind of apply the critiques, especially for them. We kind of tailor our critiques to each other because we know each other's style. And more than that, we collaborate on each other's music, and we're getting better at fitting each other's style from song to song as we progress along too.
I think like it's just really important to know what the artist's goal is, because like, you know, we've talked before about like I have more desire to end up playing live, and I have more desire to like grow my audience and like, I don't know, like end up becoming more broadly palatable. I think that's probably like a good way.
We all want to broaden our audiences.
Yeah, I think like, well, yeah. Sorry,
It's like,
go ahead.
It's like I just want to say like what's something like an entry level critiquer might say that I don't think is a valid critique would be an example would be like, I don't like this, it's too poppy, or like that's okay for you, but that's not really like a critique. Like maybe the artist just wants a pop song. So if you say this is too poppy, then your critique isn't helping anyone. In fact, it's actually kind of hurting. So it's like it's making a distinction between like how it vibes to you. Like and this kind of gets into a topic where now there's more songs that I think are good, but I don't like them. And I don't think I had that separation before getting into critiques, because it's like, well, if I like it, it's good. And like that's not exactly the same thing. There's a lot of stuff, and especially in Pitchfork, that I think is good, but I don't necessarily like. And I think that's important to keep in mind when we're like critiquing each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like, you're talking about like technical goodness.
No, even like
even my taste compared to Shane's taste, I can't say that, you know, something that he likes is bad, even though I might not like it. And I've come to really, I think all of us have come to realize like different styles are valid. And
yeah, I mean, like there's stuff, you know, I can listen to like Justin Bieber records and appreciate them for being like technically, most of them are technically pretty good. I don't necessarily love a lot of them, but I can also listen to like Kimya Dawson and like early Liz Phair, where it's like super underproduced, and I think those are good too.
Right,
but
you can see people resonate with good music.
But I mean, that's an important point you're bringing up. I like the aspect I was bringing up, like, as I always do, I'm going to relate it back to architecture, but it's like I've kind of developed a hatred for like minimalism, like just like slick white boxes and everything's clean and has no texture. Like I can see a minimalist building or a minimalist like interior designed space and hate it and still think that was a phenomenally designed space. Like there's like, that's something that like is really hard for, I think, people to do. Like to be able to write a paper on why that's good, but also still hate it.
I mean, that's why people like mid-century modern. It's because it's like, it ticks the boxes of being like cool lines and like very slick, but still having enough detail to like bite onto that it's interesting. I don't know if that was a good segue or not, but I like it because
I think it's good.
Something that I personally like.
Something I think that the critiquing kind of combats is something that I see all the time on social media, where it's just like this nauseating like applause box for any kind of local artist, especially. So someone says, "Oh, check out my new song," and then it's just like you have like, you know, depending on the popularity of the artist, you have, you know, 100 people telling them what a great job that they just did. And well, that's cool. And encouragement definitely plays a role, and having a solid support base, plays a role in you progressing. There's also a role where you need your art to be beat up by other people. You don't want it beat up just to be beat up. You don't want your art to be beat up for no reason. And that's why you want to trust the people beating up your art. And maybe that comes from like I used to do some jujitsu and things like that. And
in the before times,
yes. And there's a lot of kind of parallels that you can pull from a martial arts or jiu-jitsu experience, because just being uncomfortable, that like growth doesn't really come if there's not discomfort, or real growth, I should say. And I think that that's where the critiquing, when it's done effectively, it's making you uncomfortable in a way that promotes your growth.
And I think
it's not. I was just going to say, it's not you don't want to like, with the critiques themselves, it's like you want to kind of, if it's like a plant and it's like you want to like beat up the plant enough to make it more hardy. It's like you don't want to just come up and like scythe the plant down and then so that it's just dead. You know what I mean?
But you want the wind to blow on it and maybe get rained on pretty hard.
Yeah, but you don't want to like just chop it down or pour pesticide on the plant, you know, with your critique, because that's not helping anything.
It's like people who are bedridden, their bones get really screwy because their muscles aren't pulling on their bones, and it makes their bones more brittle. That's just a fun biology fact. Just out here using my degrees. I don't even remember what I was going to say.
It looked like Jana was about to say something, but then she did.
Oh, I was just saying you prune the trees in the key areas to promote growth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's local or not. Like how the local like critique or stuff does have its own vibe, but it might just be like I don't know. Like when people respond to music or art, it's rarely through like a critical lens. It's always through like either their personal.
Sometimes
lens.
you have to take art and you have to cut it up into little pieces, and then you have to put it in a bottle, and then it'll grow roots.
Biology.
And then you have 1,000 little plants. This felt relevant. Sometimes I have to think to myself when I talk, like, did you need to say that? Did that move the conversation forward?
I think with you, Gabby, it's like that question isn't necessarily like a yes or no question. It's like, did you need to say that? Yes. Did it move the conversation forward? Not necessarily. Like, it's not one or the other.
But in that case, she had a visual example.
Exactly, yeah.
Good, Gabby.
There seems to be a compulsion element sometimes, though. I'd like to acknowledge the compulsion.
Oh yeah, it takes. When I was in high school, I used to do these days, and I would take a day, and my whole goal for that day, and it would take all of my mental power, would be to not talk unless someone asked me a question. And I I never went a whole day without doing it because I have such a horrible compulsion to talk at all times.
All right, wait. I'm gonna say some. Fuck. What was I gonna say?
Brett has the opposite problem.
Okay, no, it was why. Here it's an open-ended question. Why do we put so much focus on critical listening and listening to critique when like no other people listen that way? It's like your average person, even in myself, like I have a critical listener and I have just like a everyday listener where I put on Spotify and I go through playlists and I listen to 4 seconds. I'm like, no, dumb, skip, bad. And like that exists. I'm wondering why we do like, what the benefit of thinking critically and listening critically is when the world doesn't listen critically.
I think that the world does listen critically. They just don't know they're doing it.
And that's what we try to pinpoint with our critiques, is for the average listener, what is it that they're saying no to and skipping over that we can capture in a good way that resonates with people? If
someone were to say, I don't know, the vibes were just off, like our job is to articulate what the vibes were and why they were off.
But also at the same time, yes, to both of those, but also at the same time have it intersect with like who we are and what we're trying to do. So it's like, that's an important part too. Like we don't want to just be chasing, just doing shit to please people 100%. We're trying to please people with something that is actually coming from inside of us, right? Like it's both.
Right. Like I like postmodern jukebox. I like Fiona Apple. I like Tracy Chapman. Like, why do I like that music? And why do other people like that music?
Because Tracy Chapman's a fucking legend.
But like, so if you put out a song, we want to intersect one of those types of music that is authentically you with, something that will resonate with other people too, which can be hard for all of us. But
I also want to bring up too that critique is like a really important part. If you went to school for music, you would have your song, especially songwriting, which I haven't. But I've known people that have. Jana, well, you didn't go to school for songwriting, but you went for
composition and media writing and production, which is like kind of film scoring ish.
Yeah, so there's that. So in songwriting school, you present your song to the class, and the class, there's a correct way and an incorrect way to critique the song. It's just that I feel a lot of musicians, there's this social value in being self-taught.
Self-taught, no lessons.
Yeah, but when you're coming from the self-taught camp, you never experience, and so it's kind of celebrated to be self-taught. And a lot of artists, especially when they're like first coming into it, they feel like that their art should be pure and things like that, and that to put it in a position that where it can be checked by others, it somehow gets impure, and I don't think that's the case. I think it kind of sharpens your intention of you as an artist by opening up yourself to meaningful critique. And like I said, it's not just songwriting. If you go to any type of art school, photography has, like, I forget what they're called, like panels where you submit a photo and then people just tell you like what's wrong with your photo, like about the composition, blah, 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 all that stuff. It's just, music has this large pool of people that come from this self-taught, my art should be pure camp.
I felt it, therefore it's important. Is like a pretty typical statement from like a musician, I feel like.
I think there's something to be said here about like knowing the rules so that you can break them, but I can't quite articulate it right now.
Yeah. Well, I think the main rule of art isn't necessarily that, you know, it has to be technically good, but there does have to be some type of intention behind it. And I think the critique sharpens that intention.
You know, ultimately art is something that people can identify with and resonate with. And so I think us critiquing is kind of a form of identifying what other people might identify with. And the more you can find identifiers in other art or other music, the more you can grow as an individual artist yourself, right? So this like pure music school of thought is almost a sheltered school of thought, where if you don't expose yourself to more, you're not going to really grow. You're going to be somewhat stunted. And that's what I'm finding with a lot of my music, even, is like opening myself up to different styles and different possibilities is going to make me a lot more versatile as an artist.
Right. And that, what you brought up, there's like that story about the hermit crab, right? So the hermit crab just finds stuff to make that its home, which is its shell, which is its protection. And so as the crab grows, it has to cast off its old shell and take on and experience a time where it's exposed and defenseless to predators as it finds a new shell that it can kind of grow into more, you know? And I have to say, like, I'm coming at this where the idea of critique was alien and new to me. And I was more of the, oh, my art is pure, like I should be able to do what I want and not answer to anyone thing. But I think that that's kind of way too ego driven for any kind of meaningful success to happen. In my experience, like, I feel like if I had a group like this that was checking what I was doing, it lets you, I feel like you can make more leaps in growth as an artist as opposed to just you being your own check.
Absolutely. It opens doors that you didn't even see.
Yeah.
You know, you
can't be your own check. Like, I've learned that over and over. Like, it just looks, your art looks different in your head than it does like when you put it out. And we've even talked about the phenomenon of like, as soon as like I post it, I'll think about it differently. Like my song is super awesome and amazing, and then I post it and I listen to it on the Discord server and I'm like, fuck, you know. And it's like I don't know why the fuck that happens. Or like you write an email and you hit send, and then you're like, your critical brain really kicks in. You're like, fuck, did that stuff come across right?
Well, I'm really feeling.
Does Gabby need to edit that part out of the email? You know, like.
Why we started this exact thing over this whole time over 4 times.
But it's like,
no, we didn't. The magic of editing.
Yeah. Shane, you talk about that. Like you would do like some mixing work, and then like when you're about to show it to someone, you'd be like, ooh, I don't know if I did it right.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, and that's this really weird thing, because I'll mix a song and I'll listen to it. I'll take breaks. I'll go do other things. I'll listen to it again, and then I will have the artist in the control room, and I'll play them the mix. And as it's playing, all of a sudden, like, I'm hearing it in this whole new way, and it's almost. It reminds me of the quantum physics principle, right? Where like a object observe, like just the act of observing something changes it.
Dr. Quantum, because I feel like that was made by like this weird like religious dude, and that experiment was like.
Are you talking about the double the double slit experiment?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm talking about. Like they're like that was popularized by like this cartoon called Dr. Quantum, and he's like just the act of observing it changed the outcome of whether it was a particle or a wave, and like
a hotly debated topic.
It's like that's like not settled. It's like because there's also like the way they're measuring it too. So they're like, how do you know that the actual like measuring
like the act of measuring it? Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily like the observation, but whatever.
If there's anything I remember from my 2 semesters of physics in college that I only passed because I went to every office hours and cried.
Did you? Anyway, no,
I only cried once.
Hey, I want to hear what Shane was finishing though before we all hijacked it.
That was it. It was just like
I've just never heard of Dr. Quantum.
You hear things, but when you present them to a group or even a singular person, it seems like you can hear even though there's no change since the last time you were happy with it versus while you're playing it for someone, as it's playing, for some reason the act of the other person listening gives you a new perspective on it.
Yeah.
Do you know what else this is like? It's like in the before times when we would like go places and like dress up. Like I would like I'd feel really good about what I was wearing until like I went out, and then I was all like, ooh. And then sure enough, someone would be like, why are you wearing that or something? And I'm like, fuck. And it's like, whatever. Another example of the same principle. Just stepping out into the world, showing your art in the world will make you think about it different than you did in your little basement.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do we have? I feel like there's one more thing or so we should touch on before we wrap this up. I will say we should do a live one, and we will do a live critique of one of our songs and like post it, which will be helpful. And we also want to get some other people involved on the critique, preferably people who have some experience with it, like our local music critics of various publications and institutions would be cool to have on to do it like in one of our like demos, because I don't think it's that useful. I mean, it's still useful, but it's not that useful if we do a critique on like a song we just released.
Yeah, there's something to be said about, Brett brought up a metaphor at one point with pottery, and it's like the critique can have a more powerful impact or more effective impact if, for instance, if you're making pottery and the clay is wet, you can still shape it. So it's like you don't want someone's song to get too far along the process where it's almost like the pottery's been fired, and then now you have to mentally break the pottery or break your song down. That's much more difficult to make changes if it's already hardened in your mind. If you can, and that's the thing where that critique helps, is it keeps your mind in a more malleable, softer state throughout the process of the songwriting, throughout your own process of songwriting, as opposed to it hardening quicker and being able to be broken. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, but there's two issues though. It's like, and I'm just going to get super literal with this metaphor because that's what I do. So like, if you've ever done pottery or ceramics, like it's wet, and there's that stage, and then when you think you're done with it, you put it on a shelf and you let it dry until it gets bone dry, and then from that stage you usually fire it. So it's like the phase we're talking about is while you're still working with it, and there's two issues, which are like the art itself, is that actually still wet and malleable, and then like how you think about it, is that still wet and malleable? And they get connected, and it's hard to separate the two. And maybe I could even see myself arguing like, bro, the art is always malleable. Like just because the only reason you can't rework it is because of your like mental block. But I'm not sure. Like sometimes it does feel like a song's been worked and it's like kind of where it needs to be. And at that point, like just because someone has a critique on it doesn't mean you should rework it because it's been worked.
Or you have the intention of it being a vase and then someone's like, no, that should be a teapot.
Yeah. And then you're like,
but I want it to be a vase though.
Like it's already a vase. Or like it's just like you can't.
But I want a teapot.
Yeah.
But I want a teapot. Visual example.
I'm petite.
I think that's a good spot to wrap up with Gabby putting that on her head.
All right, cool. Stick around for next week when we do something else. Bye-bye.